to WAY2B TV, where there's a better way to be than atheist or theist. We were talking on the chat before we got going tonight about Google Hangouts, and Amber and Colleen said they both were interested in trying it out. And I think that would be a good thing. They said there's a lag in the chat room, and of course there always will be. Joni, you probably need to refresh your screen because you're not showing on anymore on the Hangouts. Yeah, I can hear you trying. Okay, cool. All right, so anyway, we're going to try to get that going. What we found is on Google Hangouts, we can add up to 8 guests besides Joni and I, which means that we can get a better discussion going. And of course, it's in real time. That is, there's no lag between the Hangouts and the show. And what we're hoping to do then is to be able to do that, to be able to have a live conversation going on the show the whole time. Well, we can hear you, Joni.
Well, then tell me how to refresh.
You right click on the screen and hit the little round circle up at the top. All right. Well, we're having a little technical difficulties, but that's all right. That's all right. While she's doing that, I'll see if I can't get the show started. Tonight we continue with the WAY2B recovering from too much religion. In the current playlist, we're looking at this WAY2B written about by an ancient writer a half century after it was taught by an ancient speaker named Jesus. Jesus had died a half century earlier before the writing took place. We've already moved through the opening assertions, the benefits of adopting this way, and the tempering of religious resistance to this way of being. The so-named Sermon on the Mount was written by an ancient writer in the second half of the 1st century. So Joni suggested that we, oh, I see she's back, good. Joni suggested that we move the video to the front of the, let's see if I can get her on the screen. There she
Hello.
is. All right. Joni suggested that we move the video to the front of the show in order that we might be thinking about the questions and have an easier time of dealing with the video and what's on the video and not get so involved in chatting about other things and whatnot. And maybe that would make the conversation throughout the show a little bit more productive and fruitful. So we're gonna try that again this week. We tried it last week and it seemed to work. It seemed to work well. In the video this evening, we're beginning to look at the 6 illustrations of how this way plays itself out in real life. There are 3 illustrations of law and 3 illustrations of religious ritual in the proposed ancient speech. Each of these illustrates the shift from just doing religion to being in the way. This week we will address the first and probably the most well-known of the illustrations, which pertains to a well-known Jewish law, which we all know well today, and that is the law of murder. Obviously, no one thought murder was right. Everyone thought murder was wrong. And so ask yourself tonight, is your course of life determined more by what you do than by your way of being? Is the course of life determined more by what you do and what you say than in your way of being, in this way about you, if you will? And so we'll play that. We'll go ahead and play the video, and then we'll go ahead and do the context right after that, and move on then to the discussion. Here comes the video. In the videos thus far, the ancient writer has the ancient speaker proposing a set of attitudes, like humility, gentleness, mercy, and peace. And the writer proposes the benefits of adopting these attitudes. Metaphorically, he says, you can be for others the spice of life, the light of the world, and/or a refuge in difficult times. In our last video, the writer has Jesus tempering religious resistance and introducing the shift from religion to the way. In this and several videos to follow, the ancient writer writes of how Jesus may have illustrated this difference between just doing religion and being in the way. There are 6 of these illustrations, 3 Jewish laws and 3 religious rituals. Both atheists and theists squint at these illustrations, taking snippets of them literally. The most vocal atheist envisioned Jesus as a bumbling idiot, giving some moderately good advice mixed with an abundance of bad advice. The most vocal of theists employ religious clip art to transform each of these illustrations into new law and/or new ritual concerning capital punishment, divorce, marriage, giving, praying, and to sacrificing to religion itself. These are only illustrations of the shift, not new law and not new ritual. They illustrate the fuller understanding, the fulfillment. The writer has the speaker promising 30 seconds ago. The longest of the ancient writer's illustrations is only about a minute and a half. Each of the illustrations of religious law begins with Jesus saying, in essence, "You've heard it said, but I tell you another way." The ancient writer depicts the ancient speaker as saying, "You have heard that the ancients were told, 'You shall not murder, and whoever commits murder shall be liable to the court.' But I say to you that everyone who is angry with another shall be guilty before the court. And whoever shall say to another, 'Rakah,' shall be guilty before the Supreme Court. And whoever shall say, 'You fool,' shall be guilty enough to go into the fiery hell. If therefore you are presenting your offering at the altar, and there remember that another has something against you, leave your offering there before the altar, and go your way. First be reconciled to the other, and then come and present your offering. Make friends quickly with your opponent at law, while you are with your opponent on the way, in order that your opponent may not deliver you to the judge, and the judge to the officer, and you be thrown into prison. Truly I say to you, you shall not come out of there until you have paid up the last cent." The first illustration is something very familiar to the speaker's listeners. To commit murder is clearly wrong, but uncommon. They knew the law of the 10 Commandments. Virtually all agreed with this illustration. The ancient writer has Jesus introducing the fulfillment, the shift. If you control your attitude, would your action ever occur? The writer employs the rhetorical device of escalating from a flawed attitude to an undesirable action. Anger escalates to calling names, rakah. Calling names escalates to stronger insults, "You fool." Eventually, someone gets hurt. This makes sense to me. We taught our children this. My parents taught me. Their parents taught them. Anger leads to words. Words lead to sticks and stones. Sticks and stones lead to broken bones. "Watch your mouth," my mother said. The ancient writer then has the speaker contrasting attitude with a common ritual. Being a peacemaker is more important even than giving your offering at a religious altar. Instead, reconcile with others foremost. Being a peacemaker is more important than giving money to religion. The ancient writer has Jesus using the public giving ritual to illustrate again in about 3 minutes. The ancient writer goes on to have Jesus reinforce the shift to attitude with another direct reference to law. The results of making peace are more palatable than proving your point in court. The anger that initially motivated you to court could backfire into penalties for you. You provoke the penalty of your own anger, reflected back upon yourself. When either atheist or theist teaches righteous anger, beware. Both atheism and theism needs to watch its mouth. Then the ancient writer addresses something familiar to most of us. Growing up, I was taught that calling a person a fool brought more judgment than calling them any other derogatory name. The speaker was not depicted by the ancient writer as proposing a pecking order for insults, new laws about name-calling, or a better ritual for giving at the altar, filing lawsuits, or a warning concerning debtor's prison. The attitude to manage is anger. The way to be is a peacemaker, not a legalist. This is part of the fulfillment the writer has the speaker promise a moment and a half ago. In the next video, we look at the ancient writer's depiction of Jesus' treatment concerning the matter of infidelity. Again, we will see that both atheist and theist use the ancient writer's words in the same literal fashion, but for their own individual purposes. Well, tonight, as we move through this evening, we want your questions and comments. There are several ways to do this. First, callers can call 863-940-0047. Secondly, we have an active Twitter feed on screen throughout the broadcast. Just tweet hashtag WAY2B We're in startup mode, so when Twitter is being used, we keep it on, and when no tweets are coming in, we keep it off screen. We see all the incoming tweets on our screen regardless. And the chat room is open. Both Joni and I monitor the chat room. You can interact with us in between shows by email at interact@way2b.org. And you can text the Way to 22828 to receive our newsletter each Thursday morning. Each newsletter will have a direct link to the broadcast. The newsletter also contains the discussion starter videos we will be using that same Thursday evening. Finally, to receive direct notices each time we post a new video, please subscribe to our Way2B TV channel on YouTube. When you see the Way2B TV logo in the bottom right-hand corner, you can do so directly by clicking on it. This would help us greatly. Well, good evening, Miss Joni. How are you this evening? I guess I better turn your sound on. Now, how are you this evening?
Well, I guess I'm still good. How are you?
I'm fine. What do you think about my question tonight? Is the course of life determined more so by what we do and say than by the way we are, by that way about us, by our way inside? What do you think?
You can't wear a mask 24/7.
No,
You're going to be revealed at some point.
Right.
Although I've seen lots of people try.
Yeah.
And I don't like them, or I tend to not like them to do that because it's fakey and it's not genuine. And I would rather be genuine.
So what about the chat room? Have we got anybody commented about the video on the chat room so far?
I'm looking.
No, I don't see any.
I don't either.
There's basically there's 6 of these illustrations. 3 of them are laws and 3 of them are rituals. The 3 laws are murder, adultery, and revenge. In other words, you've heard it said to love your enemies. I mean, to love your friends, but hate your enemies, and that sort of language. The 3 rituals are giving, prayer, and sacrifice. And in all of these, what Jesus is doing is illustrating a shift from this idea of doing religion to being in the way. This idea of just doing the law in relation to being in the way. In other words, what he's saying is if you start out with the right attitude, you wind up with the right doing and the right saying. But you can walk the walk and talk the talk all day long and never be in the way. And we see many people today do just exactly that. And that is they can talk a good game religiously, but they really don't have much going on inside. Carol says the change has to be internal. And I think that's what Jesus was teaching, is that the change had to be internal. So he taught this shift, is what he taught. Today in Christianity, though, we hear all these snippets and sound bites and buzzwords and cliches and all this kind of stuff out of the Sermon on the Mount, especially from these laws and from these laws and from these rituals. And what you hear is out of the Christian community most often is that Jesus was making laws about adultery, and he was making laws about divorce, and he was making laws about all kinds of things. And if you think it, you might as well do it. In the case of adultery, I don't know how many times I've thought that, heard that. If you think it, you might as well do it. Well, the fact is, that's not what Jesus was talking about at all. What he was talking about is if you don't lust, then you aren't likely to then commit adultery in the process. So it's important. It's important then to understand that that's what Jesus was doing in these illustrations, and these illustrations are the heart of the Sermon on the Mount. I don't think that Christianity has really given them that credit. Instead, we get little bits and sound bites and whatnot out of them. I have read many atheists' rendition of what they thought the Sermon on the Mount was saying. And they will read the Sermon on the Mount literally, even though they say the Bible is just a bunch of fairy tales and so forth, and it has no merit, but they'll read it literally in order to describe Jesus as this bumbling idiot giving some moderately good advice with an abundance of bad advice, and that Jesus was this person who his idea of law or his idea of sin was something that sometimes unethical, sometimes immoral, sometimes downright impractical, and so forth. And the atheist will use the Sermon on the Mount in that way. The Christian fundamentalist theist, especially, will use the Sermon on the Mount to determine who's better than who, and to determine what is and is not a sin, and all of that kind of stuff. And that neither one of those situations is what Jesus was going toward. Jesus was simply talking about a very simple thing, about creating within yourself a person whose response to the world was natural. It was visceral, and as it played out in life, the results of it would make you more content because your approach to life and other people would just simply be better. It would be of higher quality. Let's see, Colleen says, I prefer karma to using revenge. You might expand upon karma.
She has 2 comments.
Huh?
She had 2 comments.
Yeah, no, I am coming to it. You might expand upon karma, Colleen. Carol says, I also believe there is an inner peace in controlling our emotions. Nothing is more painful than emotions out of control. And that is very true. The more upset I get, the more upset I get. It seems like I always feel really bad about getting out of control emotionally. Amber says, karma knows what to do all on its own. Revenge usually never works the way you want it to. Anyways, you end up punishing yourself. And Colleen says, I agree, Carol. And Colleen says, true dat, or true Amber. We said true dat that last week. But yeah, the idea is that as Jesus moves through these illustrations of the principles he just taught, in the Sermon on the Mount, for some reason, people want to say, like when Jesus said, those who keep and teach these commandments well and those who keep and teach these commandments poorly, both are in the kingdom of heaven, only to a lesser or greater degree, or know the kingdom of heaven, the peace inside. The religion wants to take those sentences, both atheist and fundamentalist theist want to take those sentences and say that Jesus said that the law would never go away, not a single jot or tittle of the law would go away, and the reason is because Jesus made a sentence like that. But when he talked about these commandments, when he talked about the law and that it would not go away, but he didn't came to abolish the law, but to fulfill, that fulfillment is in the shift from doing religion to being in the way. In other words, what Moses, for instance, or Abraham, or whoever tried to do was control people's way of being by their actions. The Old Testament teaches the walk and the talk. The 613 Jewish laws teach the walk and the talk. But Jesus came along and says, you got this thing backwards. And the reason you've got it backwards is because if you're if your way of being was correctly aligned, then your way of doing and saying would result, and it would be just fine, because what you are inside is going to come out. But you can try to do it the other way around. You can try to walk the walk and talk the talk and act, A-C-T, act like a Christian, if you will, and that's just what you get. That's just exactly what you get. And it really never changes you much. You really have to be determined, I think, as a person, to want to be the kind of person inside. It's a quality, genuine, vulnerable person who deals with other people as if you cared about them, and in a way that you want to be treated yourself. And just learning to walk and the talk will not do that for you. It just won't do it. Colleen says karma has a way of catching up with a wrongdoer. Revenge is getting yourself dirty trying to act as karma. Yeah.
Kind of like what goes around comes around?
Yeah, kind of like what goes around comes around. Or as Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, we'll get to it later on, judge not lest you be judged with the same measure with which you judge. And don't throw your pearls of wisdom before swine, lest they turn and tear you to pieces. What goes around comes around. You know, you get ugly, people are going to get ugly with you. That's kind of how it is. And revenge is all about being ugly. Revenge is all about trying to satisfy yourself, making yourself feel better because you got them back. And getting them back, I have never found ever made me feel better. Now, maybe there's some folks out there that it does make them feel better, but it does not make me feel better that somehow I made sure they got theirs. I made sure they got punished. I just never have seen that as my job in life. Colleen says, karma to me is like a sort of natural checks and balances. Amber says, you get what you deserve. And Amber says, the law of attraction. And Colleen says, exactly, the law of attraction. One thing persists in causing another. One of the things that we were talking about with the Google Hangouts, which would be fantastic, I enjoy reading y'all's chats, and I enjoy us using them. I have a hard time looking at that camera as opposed to looking at that screen, but I'm getting better at that. I glance at the screen once in a while, catch your comments, and then look at the camera to answer. I'm getting better at that. But if we can get to where we can get 7 or 8 of you online with us, with Joni and I, then we can have an open discussion. And the way Google Hangouts works, you see Joni right there in the picture. Well, the way it works is if Joni's talking, she's on screen. If one of y'all talk, then you're on screen. And the Google Hangouts automatically detects who's got something to say. So when you make your comment, your picture will show up there, and so your audio will be heard. Now, what's interesting about it too is if you want to do the whole deal in your bathrobe, you can put a still image there, and the still image will come up. So even if your hair is in curlers and you're sitting there in your bathrobe, you can still be on. You just put a still image there instead, and all you do is just turn off the camera. But if you've got a webcam that you've got on top of your computer, or you've got a laptop with a webcam in it, it even works on an iPad or on a tablet, or most tablets, or on a phone. I don't know how well it works on a tablet or a phone, how quickly they respond. It could be troublesome. I would certainly suggest a laptop or a PC with a webcam on top of the screen before I would do a tablet or a phone. So at any rate, let's see what else we got here. Carol says, revenge or vengeful feelings keep you in constant turmoil, thank you. I don't want to live like that. Yes. Amen. And Colleen's saying, yes, Joni. What did you say, Joni?
I give up. I think it was the code goes around, comes around.
Oh, yeah. Colleen says, I don't either, Carol. Irish families tend to run the gauntlet of all emotions. I now tend to stay away. So, I try to keep myself from being aggravated all the time. And we talked about that last week. Sometimes you have to manage your life a little bit. Sometimes you have to limit the amount of time that you're in the presence of certain people, because you can't you can't very well let yourself be aggravated all the time and maintain this way of being. And so you limit your time with certain people because certain people simply disturb your peace. So we have to watch our lives and understand that there's only, as human beings, there's only so much that we can take in that's negative without becoming negative ourselves. And
you have to be careful what you expose yourself to.
Yeah, you have to be careful what you expose yourself to. You really need to keep from being there. I would appreciate it very much if on the chat room today, since we're trying out Google Hangouts, I have Google, Joni's the only guest, but I have her on a Google Hangouts app tonight instead of the Skype that I was using. And so if you are hearing Joni's sound, let me know how it sounds to you all. If you're not hearing it, of course, I need to know that too. We heard some echoing in it earlier. You may be hearing that echo and you may not. I would certainly like to know if you're hearing an echo from Joni. And of course, in the morning when I pull the recording up, I'll either hear an echo or I won't as well. So anybody have a story to tell or anything that they would like to add to the conversation? I just think the Sermon on the Mount is top notch when it comes to that. We're going to use, we did the first illustration tonight to introduce. Jesus literally took something that was very common to them, murder. Everybody knows murder occurs. Everybody knows the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not murder. Everybody knows that. But we also know that murder is infrequent. It's more infrequent today than it was in Jesus' time, but it was more infrequent in Jesus' time than it was in Moses' time. So we know that the society has been growing in its civility toward each other, and that's good. But at the same time, we know that murder is a fairly uncommon thing today. But at the same time, then all Jesus was doing was taking a law that they obviously would not disagree with, and he said, you've heard it said, do not murder, but I tell you, don't get angry.
Don't talk trash.
Don't talk trash, Joni said. So the issue becomes then, if you don't get angry, would you ever kill a person? Has there ever been a person killed other than accidentally? All right? But when one person purposely kills another person, wouldn't you say most often than not they're angry? Wouldn't you say that is the key issue? And so what Jesus is saying is if the right attitude is developed inside, the right way to be is inside you, then how could you possibly murder someone? And so you only murder someone because you let your mind go there. You let your mind get angry enough. And first you begin to call names, raka, and then you begin to escalate the insults. You fool! You remember growing up and your parents teaching you, if you were in a Christian home especially, you got taught that if you called somebody a fool, that was the biggest sin of all, and you were in danger of the fiery hell. That's what it says in that passage. Now, one thing I tell you about the fiery hell is the word Gehenna is the word for hell that's being used there, and that's the one used throughout the New Testament. Gehenna is a ravine in South Jerusalem. In the fiery hell, the ravine, the fiery Gehenna in South Jerusalem, in that ravine is where they burned the trash and where they burned dead animals and so forth. And so you were no better than you should be thrown in the fiery Gehenna. Now, you have to decide three things. One is, if Jesus said that at all, did he mean the ravine in South Jerusalem? And he was speaking of a person who calls another person a fool being no better than trash. All right? And as Joni said, trash talking. That's what made me think of telling you all about Gehenna. And then at the same time, the number two thing you have to decide is, if Jesus said that at all, and did the ancient writer write that Jesus was talking about hell as in heaven and hell, when there was no such principle, so much genre, no such talk in Jesus' day. They talked of the kingdom of God as a place that they would rule on earth, and their oppressors would become their slaves. And it was a wealthy thing. They would become wealthy people on earth, and their oppressors would become their slaves on earth. As a people, they had been slaves many times and been captured. So when you get right down to it, then that's the next thing. Was the writer speaking of a heaven and hell type thing? The New Testament, the gospel writers did not have Jesus saying anything about this golden street, mansions, gates of pearl, heaven that we talk about. So I doubt seriously that that was it. Then the third thing you have to decide is, did the ancient writer mean the Gehenna? Okay? Did the ancient writer actually mean the ravine in South Jerusalem, south of Jerusalem, where they burned garbage? So when you get right down to it, the Christian religion has stretched and stretched and stretched and stretched.
Sounds like they picked and chosen too.
Right. And so what you do is you read a book called Revelations that was written at the end of the first century. You know, as some people say 110, 120, about 100 years after Jesus died. You read a book called Revelations where they talk about golden streets and gates of pearl and mansions and so forth. And then you take that all the way back to the middle of the first century and put it in the pen of an ancient writer. But then not only have you put it in his pen, but you've put that saying all the way back into Jesus's mouth. And so a half century before that. And so when you get right down to it, we really have not looked at the sequence of when things happened related to the development of scriptures and been very reasonable about it. Instead, the Christian religion we know today teaches really a whole different thing than they wrote. Let's see here.
It's not easily discernible to most people, though. This what we're being taught in churches. They're the people who know the language and the translations and all that kind of stuff, and we're kind of at their mercy because we don't speak Greek or Hebrew. We can't study the timeline of something we don't have access to. So you're being very insightful. Thank you, Elise.
Right, because people are subject to the preachers that they sit under. It's just about that simple. Let's see. The chat room is just buzzing away while I yak. Let me see if I can find it.
Talking about the sound first, where you left off.
Okay, yeah, they're saying it's a bit tinny. I see that. I think that it disturbs you to feel hatred. Then you would be incapable of harming someone. Colleen says, I think I would only go to the extreme of murder or hurting someone in defending my family. Well, that's not murder. I think that's probably true of a lot of people. When they talk of murder, they're talking about somebody intentionally killing another person, not defending themselves and so forth. It says, I know there is an inner hell. I've been there. Carol said that. Sorry, I didn't mean to say your last name. I'll take it out of the recording. Colleen says, as I have. And Carol says, most of us have. Amber says, I believe strongly the human psyche can snap no matter what you believe. Carol said, so do I. And Colleen said, with the last straw, I agree. And so, yeah, that's one of the reasons you need to manage your life. If you're the kind of person that there are certain things that you cannot be in the presence of but so long without becoming all messed up inside, I would very much encourage you to clear out, and you may re-enter the situation another day, but don't let yourself don't let anyone else or the circumstances of life force you to be someone other than who you want to be. And I think that's probably the most important thing that we can talk about is we We need to concentrate on the fact that we're going to be who we need to be, and we're going to manage our lives in such a way that causes us to be able to do that. And for my part of it, I just don't see that in fundamental theism, and I don't see that in hard atheism. Instead, what I see both in atheism and in theism. There aren't good guys and bad guys here. That's not the point. But in atheism and theism, the larger portion of atheists are not hard atheists. They are individuals who do care about their effect on other people in life, and they do not talk without regard to how it affects other people. And the majority of those who self-identify as Christian theists, likewise, those individuals are not fundamentalist theists. One of the things that I've said before, and this is really not very pleasing to some people, I guess, for me to say it, but the narcissistic personality disorder in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of the American Psychiatric Association refers to a narcissist as an individual who has grandiose feelings, yearns for other people's admiration of them, and has little or no empathy for other people and how they're affected. And in the most fundamentalist of camps and in the hardest atheist of camps, what I see is narcissists that have found a home. I just see individuals who take on that, they embody that way of being, where they are looking to be admired, they feel grandiose about themselves, and they have little empathy for their approach to life, the way that approach affects. They have little empathy on the people that it affects. And so when you get right down to it, that's what we're talking about. And that's why you have to manage your life. You have to be able to come and go out of the pressures that you take on. And if you're the kind of person that has this way about them, and I talked about it where it related to the people in the churches that I've pastored, if you're the kind of person that has this way about them, other people will want to be around you. That's the thing. They want to be around you. And those people will, some of them will actually adjust themselves to that. I have found, for instance, I know a lady right here in this park who is one of the kindest, gentlest, humble, soft-spoken women I have ever met. And she loves people. And she's kind to people. And she tries to think of compliments that she can say to someone, something positive to say to people. Everybody wants to be around her. Now, and that's because she's decided that's who she is. And I think that's true in most of the environments, whether it's at work or whether it's in our family or whether it's if you happen to be a person who goes to church. In your church, you'll find it's the same way, that there are certain people other people want to be around. And when people are around this lady here in this park, I've noticed they tone it down. They don't, nobody hurts her. I'm not going to say her name, but nobody purposely causes her harm because she don't deserve it. And they know it. Nobody gets in her face. Nobody says ill things about her. And nobody purposely tries to make her uncomfortable. Even those that are known for doing so with other folks. She is almost, it's almost like what Jesus said at the end of the Sermon on the Mount about the house that's built upon the rock and the house built upon the sand, and the resilience that is built by having this way about you. Those who can hear these words of mine and implement them will be like the person who built their house upon the rock. The winds come and the storm comes, and the house stands. You know, and so if you have this way about you, what you find is that you are more resilient in life in the first place. But you also will find that many people just won't bring it to you. They won't treat you the way they treat other people, the way you've seen them treat other people in your presence. They won't turn to you and do it because you don't deserve it, and you don't treat them that way. So it's really a simple thing, and I'm just appalled that it has become such a complicated thing within religion. Now, within Christianity, especially in America, within our country, it has become such a complicated and huge thing that everybody's trying to figure out what is a sin, Is this sinning or is that sinning? I've had people ask me as a pastor, is this a sin? If I do this, is that a sin? And I'm like, you're living in 3000 BC with a bunch of Hebrews right now, because you're trying to figure out what does and does not accommodate those 613 Jewish laws. And so there's no reason for that to be so. Let's see what we got on the chat room. You see anything, Joni?
Yeah.
All right, read some of them to me.
Let's see. Amber says that she believes strongly that the human psyche can snap no matter what you believe, and Carol says, so do I. Colleen says, with, quote, the last straw, quote, I agree. I could never just walk up to someone and kill them. And Carol says, I can't afford to allow anyone to steal my inner peace. Once I do that, I'm in danger of losing control over my own emotions. And Colleen says, I never thought of it that way, Elise. I'm not sure what she's talking about, but it makes a lot of sense. And Carol says, good to know that, Colleen. And Colleen has a smiley face, and that's all I have on mine right now. I'll have to refresh.
Okay. All right. That may be all I have on mine. I don't know.
Nope, it goes on. Amber says, I will never believe that defending yourself, your family, or a stranger for that matter, from danger is murder. And you've already said that, Elise. There's nothing that will change my mind on that. I wouldn't condone violence otherwise. Post 30 minutes later. I'm not sure what that is.
I don't understand what the Amber. I don't know what you meant by post 30 minutes later.
30 seconds later.
30 seconds later. Yeah, that's true. And that's one of the reasons I'd love to get live guests on here, because the conversation would be alive and in real time.
Yes.
And when I say something and 30 seconds later you hear it and then you respond to it, I may or may not have even a clue what you're talking about. So that's unfortunate, but that's just the way
our fire hose is engaged.
Say what?
Your fire hose is engaged.
Yeah, yeah. It's really hard. It's really hard to deal with that 30-second lag. You wouldn't think that 30 seconds would have that big a effect over you, but it does.
It does.
It does, and there's nothing you can do for it, because what's happening as I stream live to YouTube, they are processing my video on the fly and sending it out to you all. And that they're 30 seconds ahead of just crashing, and we hardly ever get any buffering and so forth. So I think that's rather remarkable in itself, that individual people in their own living room, like me, like I'm doing tonight, but people can sit in their own living room and broadcast shows of interest to them and to the people that listen to them. And there's only 30 seconds required to process it on the fly. And you could sit here for an hour and not get anything, and never buffer. It never stall or pixelate. It's amazing. It really is amazing. So I can't really complain so much. It just really is amazing stuff. Let's see here. Colleen says, America is no longer a haven to practice your religion. Not if others dislike what and how you do instead of their way. And Colleen, one of the things about that I've thought about, and I think it's really an important thing, and that is that the reason that our freedom of religion worked so well in the early years of the country, or early that first century and so forth, in this country, is because you did not have the diversity that we have now. What we have now is we have all kinds of people believing all kinds of things, and just like me, and we're celebrating that we have this freedom of religion, and we have this freedom, and we have freedom of speech. We're able to say what we need to say and talk about what we want to talk and believe what we want to believe, or disbelieve what we want to disbelieve. And the fact of the matter is, we are a nation which is more of a theocracy than we complain about the Islam being a theocracy in the Middle East, but we're more of a theocracy than we want to admit. The Christian population, especially the more vocal of it, the ones with the money and with the most attention and notoriety, the ones that have the platform, if you will, are in Congress, and they're the mayors of cities, and they're the governors of states, and they operate in city councils and so forth, and they're able to cast their influence on what's going on. Well, if a person happens to believe, like you do, Colleen, many different things about many different types of religions, and that you have sampled, if you will, a lot of it, all of it, and you think more in terms of karma and dharma and peace inside and what does it mean to live life, and not so much in terms of the supernatural. Well, that is not well suited for the tide of the population in America. I've experienced that myself. And so freedom of religion becomes a challenge. It becomes something that we have to work toward. It becomes something that people who are Christian, even, who are maybe even conservative Christians, have to say in the halls of Congress, I'm trying to exercise the will of the people, and I'm trying to exercise the Constitution of the United States and freedom and the rights of human beings that are in that Constitution, and it cannot just be my personal beliefs that drive everything I do and say as a senator or a congressman. That's where we're headed. That's what we're going toward, and we may find that this single religious mindset that we have, this theocracy, I think, that we have, will not in the future influence things as much as it has in the past. But obviously the diversity wasn't there. Now the diversity's there. Now we have a large Islamic population in America. We have a large Jewish population in America. The second largest Jewish population in the world is in America. We have...
Even as recently as Kennedy being elected, we had issues and concerns about electing a Catholic to the White House.
Right. We have trouble with religious tolerance today. And we have trouble with it because the diversity has grown so much in this country, and people have become more vocal. And the Supreme Court decisions seem to show that, because when I don't even think that the decision to allow gay marriage was the big one. Okay, I'm glad about it, but I don't think it was the big one. The big one that was made in the last year or two was when the Supreme Court's justices of this country upheld the Constitution by striking down DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act. And DOMA was simply a law, which they said in their own briefs, was passed in order to discriminate against one class of people. And they recognized that. And even though we have a very conservative court overall, they wound up striking down DOMA and then later saying that gay marriage was a equal right to the gay population, and that the states could not limit that. And so we're changing, is what's happening. All we're seeing is things are changing, and I think it's changing for the better. Now, obviously, I listen to a lot of Moody Radio, and I was listening to one of my theology professors from seminary, who is the president of Southern Baptist Theological Seminary today, talking at Dallas Theological Seminary, where he was invited to a celebrated, very prestigious lectureship to speak. And he was speaking on the new atheist and how they were destroying religion, how they were destroying Christianity in particular. And so people are shook up. They're shook up because all of a sudden, it's almost like you were in charge, and then some people showed up, and suddenly your control and your power got diluted. All right? That's kind of how it feels, I think, to a lot of people today, and they're responding like it feels like that. But there's nothing wrong for me with a theist who wants to believe all of the things that a fundamentalist Christian believes. I don't believe it, but they can believe it if they want to, and I have no ill will for them whatsoever. And it's nothing wrong for me with a person who says, I don't believe, and I'm an atheist, and they don't believe anything at all about what that fundamentalist Christian beliefs and are critical of it, that doesn't bother me either. I just wish both sides would learn how to talk to each other. I wish they'd learn how to be in the same space with each other, be in the same country with each other, because it's always going to be that way. And
It's because they don't really know what they believe. I said that on the car today
Yeah.
to you. They wouldn't be so vehement in their arguments if they were so convinced that they could just live their lives.
Right.
They wouldn't have to go around beating other people over the head with their ideas that they think they believe, but they don't know if they believe them or not.
Right. And the fact is that what you just said was, you said they don't know what they believe. The fact is, apply that to atheism too.
Yes.
Because I would say the majority of atheists don't know what they disbelieve. Okay? They don't know what they believe or disbelieve. It is really, huh?
I agree.
And you and I were talking about it. You and I were talking about it the other day, and the truth is, the atheist says you can't be an agnostic, and the fundamentalist Christian, for the most part, says you can't be you're either an atheist or a theist. That is, you either believe or you disbelieve. Well, for some of us, it's not about that. For some of us, that's not even the subject. Whether I believe or disbelieve, that's not even where I concentrate my thoughts. Whether I believe or disbelieve is just maybe interesting and something for coffee conversations at breakfast with some friends, but really it has nothing to do with living your life. Atheists will say, atheists will say, if you believe, as a fundamentalist Christian believes, that will lead to bad actions and bad thoughts, and you will ruin your life. The fundamentalist Christian says if you disbelieve, as the hard atheist disbelieves, you're going to hell, and you're a bad person, and you're full of sour thoughts. And quite frankly, neither one of them depict the other, in my experience, what they are. I have atheist friends. I have theist friends. And I know full well that there are those with this way about them in both camps. I've seen it many times. There are those who are as concerned about you in the atheist camps as there are those who are concerned about you in the theist camps. There are those who are automatically critical of you in the atheist camps, just like there are those who are automatically critical of you in the theist camps. You cannot do it that way. There aren't good guys and bad guys. That is not the point. The point is...
Back to the chat room. Colleen says, having these freedoms doesn't give others, I think, the right to curtail your own. Religious blinders. They see what they feel you do wrong, but not their own. And then Amber says, it's easier to focus on others than ourselves.
Right.
And I'm guilty of it. Colleen says, yep, me too. Put me on the freeway and I lose my mind. And Colleen says, that's why I don't miss driving so much. I have to be on the freeway 2 hours every day.
But when they push it on you, then there's a problem, Carol said.
Okay.
Yeah,
I haven't gotten that one yet.
Yeah, Carol says. But yeah, Joni and I talk every single evening on her way back. And sometimes in the morning too. Sometimes we just text in the morning. But we talk every single evening on her way back from work from Nashville to Murfreesboro. And I can promise you, let's see, who was that said about on the road?
Amber said, put me on the freeway and I lose my mind.
Yeah, Amber, you and Joni don't
it's called
need to
road rage.
Yeah, Joni, you and Joni need to ride somewhere together.
I can say anything I want to in my car and nobody hears me but possibly you. And you know, it never goes any further than that. So
I'll be listening on the phone and we'll be talking about something, and she drives a little Honda Fit, little bitty car, and it's got a little bitty horn to go with it. And yeah, and I'll be listening on the phone and I'll hear, hey, and I'll say, okay, what'd they do? And she'll tell me what they did. They cut her off or whatever. But yeah,
that's the only sound of discouragement they get from me.
Right. Well, what else we got on here? Anything else?
No, Carol was last. When they push it on you, then there's a problem, and there is a problem. But I will say that you don't have to take it. You don't have to absorb that. You can say, "Oh, I'm so sorry." You're in your mind, and don't go back at them with it. But you don't have to accept what they think about you. You don't have to absorb that at all.
No, you don't. One of the interesting things that I think you could do. Now, I know some of you all are not much into reading the Bible. Of course, I love reading the Bible. I love studying the Bible, and I love studying Greek and Hebrew. But here's the thing. In between now and in between shows, especially while we're studying the Sermon on the Mount, go in there and read those 6 illustrations, and read them from the mindset of Jesus is trying to tell us the same thing in all 6 illustrations. He's trying to tell us the same thing in all 6 illustrations. Now, religion has made 100 things out of them. Okay, all kind of religious laws, all kind of religious rituals, and so forth. But the fact is, Jesus is trying to tell us the same thing in all 6 illustrations, and you'll see it. You'll see it very plainly because all of the illustrations are contrast from this way to that way, from murder to being angry, from praying in public to praying alone, from loving your friends to loving your enemies, from committing adultery, the law, to being lustful, being a lustful person. But the point is, you go through there and you will realize that he's trying to tell us the same thing. And it's got nothing to do with murder. It's got nothing to do with adultery. It's got nothing to do with revenge and so forth. What he's trying to tell us is you've been concentrating on the wrong thing. And that one thing is very identifiable. But you'll see what I mean. And if you read the very short, we only got into the Sermon on the Mount about less than a minute. I'll have to go back and look at the timing. But if it was spoken aloud, when we got to the first illustration, we had been into the Sermon on the Mount for less than 60 seconds. All right? Now, and this illustration today was 56 seconds. The point is this, is how in the world we manage to, as the Christian religion, how in the world we manage to interpret everything in the Sermon on the Mount based on the 750,000 words we call the Bible. Something that can be said aloud in 13 minutes and 15 seconds. And that we manage to hook all kinds of things in the Sermon on the Mount to all kinds of other ancient things. We hooked them to those. Instead of thinking about how what has just been said 30 seconds after something else has been said probably have something to do with one another. It's called a contiguous line of thought. And if we can't look at the contiguous line of thought that is there, we're not going to understand what was the scuttlebutt that was going around that the writer tried to document about what Jesus might have said and taught a half century earlier. Okay? In other words, we've made this magic book and these magic teachings. Some of y'all may already know, I don't believe in an inerrant, inspired, infallible, perfect Bible. The Bible is a collection of ancient writings, much of which is unrelated, and many different approaches to the same subject, not all agreeing with each other, many different accounts of what appears to be some historical events that didn't even occur at the same time, even though it was the same event, depending on who wrote it. And the fact is, we need to look at the ancient text as being valuable, being interesting, and certainly we're studying and reading and learning from, but at the same time, not magic. Not magic. And because if we go the inspired, inerrant Word of God thing, then what we wind up with is trapped. Because now we have to harmonize 750,000 words that cannot be harmonized. And you talk about, you want to add turmoil to your life? live in such a way. And that's basically what's called going to church and learning things that all these things make sense. All these things line up. Well, no, they don't. No, they don't. They only do because we have nuanced them and remolded and remade them and refashioned them and put them together and dodged certain parts of them altogether that you never hear from the pulpit, in order that we keep it in sync and we keep it sounding like it's this perfect book. But it's not a perfect book, not by any means, especially when you add the fact we don't have any originals. We don't have any copies of the originals. We don't have any copies of the copies of the originals. We don't have any copies of the copies of the copies of the originals. All right? And we have 5,700 handwritten manuscripts with hundreds of thousands of variances between them. We just need to wake up and start thinking about what does it have to offer. And if Jesus was a real man, and I think he was, and he got a real following, and I think he did, what is it he taught? And what did it mean? Was he running around doing supernatural stunts? Or was he actually teaching something that was in their lives, something important? What are you laughing at, Joni?
The chat.
What does it say?
Well, once we said, Carol said about when they push it on you, then there's a problem. She said walk away. So,
Right.
But then Colleen said my ex, when we lived in England, disturbed some Jehovah's Witnesses when they told him they were here to help find Jesus. And he said, quote, "Oh my God, Jesus is missing. Let me get my coat and I'll help you find him." And Carol agrees with you. It's all about talking about managing our emotions. That's all. And then Colleen said, he said, let me help you find him. Needless to say, they backed away quickly. Sounds like a really good plan.
Okay, well, we are past our time. We are a couple, 3 minutes past our time. And I don't know that that matters all that much, but I try to keep it an hour to respect people's time, because I know if you go on and on and on and you make an hour and a half show or a 2-hour show out of a 1-hour show, certain people don't want to leave, but they really needed to, and that sort of thing. The same thing when I used to teach live groups is that they, if they came for an hour, they wanted to be an hour and then they wanted to leave. That makes more sense. It's more respectful of people's time and of what they had planned or what they might have in their minds. So I'm going to send you to the credits. Thumbs up if you like it. Thumbs down.
Thanks, guys.
Thumbs down. There's really no reason to ever thumbs down, but thumbs up if you like it. Thumbs down if you don't. Tweet it, Facebook it, share it, subscribe, forward the newsletter to people. We love you, and I appreciate you being here every night. Colleen and Carol and Amber, y'all did a great job tonight, and you just typed your little hearts out. And
Work on the hangout thing.
Yeah, and we're going to work on the hangout thing, because I think it would be fun for all of us to be on together. Jan's interested too. Jan and Mary are interested too. And we'll all get on there together and be in real time with real voices, real faces, and it would make a lot of difference. It would be almost like we were all sitting in the same room, which I think would just be fabulous. So here we go. I'm going to send you the credits.
Bye.